in August, I did a video about Women in Translation Month and a resource that I had found in the Warwick Prize for Women in Translation. Through that video, I just discovered a lot of books that I had never heard of before. I thought it was really interesting, and they have just announced their long list for 2024. So really quickly, I'm going to go through it, and then I'll take a little break and I'll do a little bit more research on what the books are actually about. But I'm quite excited for this list because I think it really puts a spotlight on something that is lacking in my reading particularly, which is women in translation. And I think overall, they give some statistics on the percentage of men versus women in translation, and it's very skewed male. So I thought, you know what, let's do a tiny little video on it. Let's see if we can't find some new books to read and go from there. So for the first time, I'm gonna look at this list. I'm not expecting to know a single thing or a single book on it, but I'm really curious to see what's here. So the long list for 2024, there is the picture, and let's see what they have to say. We have Adon, an epic by Linnea Axelsson, translated from the Swedish by Saskia Vogel. I feel like I've heard of this book. It's possible somebody I watch on BookTube really enjoyed it, but like I said, I'll do a little bit more research after. Death of the Rider by Yulia Yakovleva, translated from Russian by Ruth Amedze Kemp. Ido Souls by Stella Gaetano, translated from the Arabic by Sawad Hussein. You should know that the translator does not have to be female, only the author has to be female. The Factory by Hiroko Ayumada, translated from the Japanese by David Boyd. Greek Lessons by Han Kang, translated from Korean by Deborah Smith. That shouldn't be surprising. She's a very well-known author. Holy War 2021 by Maria Stepanova, translated from the Russian by Sasha Dugdale. The Hunger of Women by Marosia Castaldi, translated from the Italian by Jamie Richards. Chyros by Jenny Erpenbeck, a very well-known book here on BookTube because of the booker. I, in fact, own a copy of this one. I love this book so very much. Did I say translated from the German by Michael Hoffman? Mariana Circa by Grazia Deledda, translated from the Italian by Graham Anderson. Mild Vertigo by Meiko Kane, translated from the Japanese by Polly Barton. Revelation Freshly Erupting by Nellie Sachs, translated from the German by Andrew Shanks. Sleepless by Marie Derusikia. Ooh, I'm sorry. And again, I apologize for these names. When English is your first language, you are very sheltered with the combination of certain letters, and I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Translated from the French by Penny Houston. Too Much of Life, The Complete Chronicles by Clarice Lispector, translated from the Portuguese by Margaret Joel Costa. Again, a very well-known author. I've never read her stuff, but I've definitely heard about her. White Nights by Ursula Honeck, translated from the Polish by Kate Webster. And finally, Yogurt and Jam, or How My Mother Became Lebanese, translated from the Arabic by Nadia Abdulatif. The author is Lena Merhej, and I actually think I talked about this one in my video as one that I thought sounded really interesting. It's a graphic novel. Like I said, I am going to get my life together. You might hear my blueberries are warming up on the oven. I'm gonna have breakfast, I'm gonna get my coffee, and I'm gonna do a little bit more research on these books and talk about the award a little bit more, but I am quite excited about having a new award to look forward to, especially because I really struggled with the Booker this year again, and so hopefully I find some winners. Let's see which ones I can get from the library, what they're about, and which ones I find I want to read. Okay, I will see you in a moment. Cheers everybody, my name is Hope, and we are going to get this video properly started with a pumpkin spice miso. I'm very excited about it. And I have some pumpkin spice milk that I need to get through from Trader Joe's because I opened it. Okay, I have had the morning to kind of look into these books. I have also found out which ones I can and cannot get from my library, and I tried a chapter of all the books that I could get my hands on. So ahead of time, this video might seem a little choppy because I am going to be inserting little clips of me trying some of these books out and putting my thoughts in. So I apologize ahead of time if it's not the most coherent thing in the world, but it's the first time I've tried to do this type of video, and I really don't know what I am and am not missing in the filming process. It's a learning experience for everybody. For me, it'll be a learning experience for you too, I'm sure. And we are going to get started. I am going to go through the 15 books that were longlisted. What is it? 15 books, 10 languages. The shortlist is going to be announced the end of October, and the winner is going to be announced the 21st of November. The winner gets £1,000. It is not the biggest prize in the world, but it is one that I think could be really fun to follow. And so I'm going to attempt to do so. We will see. The first book I want to talk about is Adon, and this is it's an epic story in verse, essentially is what it is. And I actually was able to get my hands on a copy of this, so I do have some thoughts after reading the initial little bit. This book ultimately is about the fate of two indigenous Sami families and their struggle and persistence over colonialism, loss, and displacement. And Adon means land. You can see the connection there. And I, like I said, read the first little bit of this book. So I will insert what I thought here, and then we will move on to the next one. The goal was to read just a couple chapters of each book that I had out. And I thought for sure this book, Adon, was not going to be one that I was going to particularly love because it is a novel in verse. But I'm 87 pages in, and I'm really enjoying it. It is one that I will definitely be continuing. The flow of the story is done really well. I cannot imagine how much work went into translating this book because it is in verse. I feel like there would be something very, very challenging about doing that, and they've done a really great job. And I think when I think a book in verse, I really think about poetry, and I guess it is its own type of poetry, but the way this one's being told, it's being told very linearly. You can follow the story really well. It is still very poetic, but I am understanding what's happening, and I really, really, really appreciate that. So I will be continuing with this book, and that is a great surprise. But thumbs up to the translator and the writer for creating something and for getting me to read a format of a story that I really typically avoid. So that is awesome, and we shall move on to hopefully actually just the first chapter of the next one. Next up, we have Death of the Red Rider by Yulia Yakovelva, and this is a 400-page book translated by Ruth Admadzi-Kemp, and it is translated from the Russian. And this appears to be a detective novel. It does, I do believe, belong to a series, and it's not the first book in the series, I don't think. It's called the Leningrad Confidential series, and again, it was one that I was able to get my hands on, so I do in fact have the ability to talk a little bit more about what I think of the book, and I will put that clip in after this. But it is a book that, I say this with every kind of awards, and any kind of award, putting in sequels or books that are part of series, I'm not totally sure that that's the smartest thing to do, but again, I do have some thoughts on this book. I read the prologue of, what is it called? Death of the Red Rider. And for me, first of all, it's a prologue. So you know already it's gonna maybe offer a different point of view or something from the main part of the story, because prologues kind of do that sometimes. And I think this is one that I will keep on hold, and I will keep through Libby for a little while, but it isn't one that I'm jumping to immediately. The first prologue, for the prologue, you are, how many times can I say the word prologue? You are following a cobbler, and a woman comes in and demands that he fix her shoes, and he just leaves. And he ends up, it kind of seems like in a bar pub type thing, and he gets into a confrontation with another man a little bit. And there seems to be a lot of context that I am missing in this particular case, and I don't know if it's because I think this is part of a series, so I'm not sure if I'm missing something for that, or if I'm missing something because I don't know the historical situation of this area. And so for me, it is one that the writing seems fine, it seems okay, but it isn't one that is grabbing me right off the bat, but it isn't one that I'm immediately discarding either. So that is how I feel about that one. After a prologue, I did think about reading the prologue and the first chapter, but because I have 6 others or 5 others to read, I really just wanted to cut it there, and we will see how it goes. But like I said, it's one that I will keep in my Libby app for a little while and see if I get to it, because I do like a good detective novel. I enjoy those and would love to read one translated by a female from a different country. I think that could be a really interesting perspective. I'm just not sure if this is the one that's going to get me. So we move on to whatever I decide to read next. We have Ido Souls by Stella Gaetano, and this is translated from the Arabic. It's 260 pages, translated by Sawad Hussein, and this is a multi-generational epic starting in a small village in Sudan in the 1970s. I was not able to get my hands on this book, but it is one that I would be very interested in reading. Those types of stories are ones that I typically really enjoy, and will keep my eye out for it in the future. A very short little book, The Factory by Hiroko Oyamada, translated by David Boyd from the Japanese, and this is a vivid and surreal portrait of absurdity and meaninglessness in the modern workplace. And I was able to get my hands on this one, and spoiler alerts, I had a good time. Yes, I will be reading this book. I am not very far in. It's a very short book, I think just over 100 pages on my e-reader, and you are following this woman, Yoshiyama, I think is her name, and she's interviewing at this factory. And it's so funny because she's talking about how she has a liberal arts degree, and she goes into great detail about what she studied in school, and she's applying for this job at this factory. And I just find that so amusing, because how many of us went to university, got a degree, and are absolutely not using it at all in their everyday lives? I sometimes forget that I have my BA. Anyways, I find that really amusing. I think her voice could be kind of a sarcastic, dry humor, and I really enjoy that. It's giving vibes sort of convenience store woman, and We Had to Remove This Post in a way. Both books that had their moments that I enjoyed. They weren't all-time favorites, but those are the books that right now the vibes are kind of lining up. So I will definitely be continuing on with this book. One of the more well-known names on this list is Kang, who just won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and her book Greek Lessons has been nominated for this award as well. I can get this one from the library, but I am on hold. There is a wait list for this one, so I wasn't able to get it immediately to kind of see how I feel about it. I have enjoyed her writing in the past. I would imagine I will have an okay time with this one as well. She's not like an auto buy or somebody that I'm immediately out reading their stuff, but she is somebody that I am happy enough to read. And this book is about the relationship between a Greek teacher and a younger student. And I don't think it's a romantic relationship, but it seems like they're both kind of struggling with certain things, and it's about how they bond. So it could be an interesting one to get to, particularly because she is such a well-known author. I imagine if you are familiar with her work, she's somebody you're going to want to pick up. Holy Winter 2021 by Maria Stepanova, and this is translated from the Russian by Sasha Dugdale. And this is a short book, 56 pages. It is poetry, and I don't always love poetry, but I was able to get my hands on this one from the library, so I do have some more thoughts on it. But this one is about winter, war, banishment, exile, social isolation, and existential abandonment. That is a lot. And that seems like a lot to fit into only 56 pages, but we'll see how it goes. This is poetry, and it is short. I think I'm going to try to finish this one because I always give up on poetry pretty quickly. It just seems to go over my head. I don't know if anybody else feels this way when it comes to poetry. I personally find it challenging sometimes to understand what the messaging is, but I think that because it's short, I think I'm going to try to dedicate myself to reading this book. But it is poetry. If you are a poetry lover, then this is obviously one that you can pick up. It's clearly a voice that maybe needs to be listened to, somebody who is speaking out against Russia and what they're doing. You know, give them the time and the space to get their message across to you. So I am going to attempt to finish reading this book. However, I am noting right now that because it's poetry, I'm probably going to miss a lot. However, I feel okay about leaving this one on the list as one that I'm going to read. I think what I'm discovering about this prize is it must be very challenging to come up with a long list when so many different formats are eligible for the prize. Nonfiction, fiction, experimental, memoirs, poetry, graphic novels. Like, there are so many different ways to present your story in translation, and I think it's really interesting that they're able to take so many of different formats and put it into one prize, because we do so often, or I do anyways, focus on strictly fiction, which makes me kind of doing even these triad chapters maybe not the best person for it, because I do tend to stick to a certain formatting in my reading, which means I don't always give different types of format a great shot, which is why I'm going to try to stick to this book of poetry. I am, like I said, also going to try to stick to the other books that I've already talked about, even if they weren't ones that necessarily spoke to me, or I said I wasn't likely to read. I am going to keep them around because I think ultimately I would like to give as many of these books a chance as possible, just because I think it's important that I'm reading women in translation. There is The Hunger of Women by Marossia Castadelli, translated from the Italian by Jamie Richards. And this follows a woman named Rosa who opens a restaurant, and it follows her relationships and her kind of discovery of the different types of relationships that can exist between women, from platonic to romantic. Definitely seems like a study of females, kind of is what it seems like. And it is one that I was able to read a little bit of. The first chapter of The Hunger of Women is 43 pages. I will not be reading the 43 pages. This has no punctuation in it. It is, imagine Sally Rooney without punctuation. And I mean, Sally Rooney already has a very unique style, but you take the punctuation out, and I don't think I could read her stuff. This, I think, is probably going to be a pass. I'm going to read a few more pages. Right now, the narrator is talking about how her husband passed away, and so she's kind of dealing with it. It sounds like she's dealing with it through food, which I guess would make sense, because I believe the premise of this book is that she opens a restaurant, and there seem to be a lot of women that, like, they kind of get together and they talk. I will read a little bit further to find it for sure, or solidify more what's happening, but the writing style of this, I think, is going to be a big struggle for me. Okay, yes, this book is not for me. The one thing that I think would keep me reading a little bit longer if I wasn't doing just this triad chapter thing is there are a lot of descriptions of food, and they're very appetizing. I think if you enjoy kind of that really almost like sensual food description type thing, then you could find something to really enjoy about this book. And again, if you also really enjoy more experimental writing and experimental prose and formatting in your reading, this could definitely be a book that you enjoy. I, however, have always struggled with that sort of stuff in the enjoyment of my reading, So this for me is going to be a pass, but that's okay because reading is subjective. We then have the one book on the list that I have in fact actually read, and that is Chyros by Jenny Erpenbeck. As I mentioned earlier, I really enjoyed this book. It is translated from the German by Michael Hoffman, and you're following Katharina and Hans as they have an affair. There's a huge age gap, and it's kind of, this affair is happening through the fall of the Berlin Wall. I absolutely love this book. I think the writing is incredible. I talk more about this in my International Booker when I discuss the International Booker, but this is brilliant, and obviously I loved it because I went out and bought myself a copy. So it's got to be good when you actually go out and buy the book physically. Let's talk about Mariana Circa by Grazia Delada, translated from the Italian by Graham Anderson. And this is about Sardinian life, exploring the layers of temptation and doubt. This one is not available to me. I couldn't really figure out exactly, I felt like the synopsis on the publisher's website was maybe a little vague on this one, so I really don't quite understand what this book is about. So it's not one that I was immediately drawn to, but it made the list, so it's got to be semi-good, right? Mild Vertigo by Miko Kanai, translated from the Japanese by Polly Barton. And this is total stream of consciousness. It's about trying to find yourself in kind of the minutia of life when you're in this life that is very expected, very standard, very generic, and the thought process of a woman as she goes through this. And I was able to get my hands on this one, so I do in fact have a couple more things to say about it. I haven't even gotten through one full page of, what's this one called? Mild Vertigo, and already it is very stream of consciousness, which if you've been here for any length of time, you know is not my favorite. But literally the first page, this entire book might just be one sentence. I'm not even kidding. We will see how this one goes. Stream of consciousness for me has to be done in a really particular way in order for me to enjoy it. I get annoyed with it very easily. I'm not sure how this one is going to go, but we will see. However, the cover of this with the sweater, I think, and the flowers, I love that cover so much. I think that's so pretty, which means I'm hoping I enjoy this book, because a good cover with a good book is a great combo. Page 10 is where the first sentence ends. Just an FYI. Okay, Mild Vertigo. I am not sure that this book is for me. It is, the stream of consciousness thing, which isn't done too terribly. I'm not disliking the way it's been written. The story is literally just about this woman going through her day-to-day life. Like, it started off with talking about the layout of her apartment, and then what she's going to do when her kids want their own rooms, and then about just cleaning. And I'm struggling to understand how I'm going to find this book entertaining, because it is about the minutia of life and the little things you do every day, and I am not sure I need to read a book like that. Again, I'm probably, with all of these, I will leave them in my Libby app until they are due to be renewed, or the hold comes up, but I am not sure that this one is for me. I think if you like books like, the one that most comes to mind is Eva Beltzazar, who wrote What Boulder and Permafrost. I think if you liked her books, you would enjoy these books, but I didn't love those books, and so I think this one might be a pass for me. But again, who knows, in the future, in the next few weeks, if I still see it sitting in my Libby app, I might give it another shot. But I think you have to really kind of enjoy that type of storytelling, and it's just not my favorite. I can, however, see people really enjoying it, particularly people who more relate to her as a character, and who, like I said, enjoyed that type of storytelling. This could definitely be a book that you enjoy as well. Next up, we have Revelation Freshly Erupting by Nellie Sachs, translated from the German by Andrew Shanks. And this is poetry as a direct response to the Holocaust. So I believe this book has been around for a while, but it has only just been translated into English, which is why it's eligible for the prize. Unfortunately, it is not one that I can get a hold of, and so don't have anything further to say except that I imagine it would be pretty heartbreaking and probably pretty eye-opening. And I think if you can get your hands on it, could definitely be a book of poetry worth looking into. We then have Sleepless by Marie Derriesque, and I apologize because I have absolutely no idea how to pronounce that name. Translated from the French by Penny Houston, and this actually seems really interesting. It's about the author's experience with insomnia, and it is a mix of autobiography, clinical observation, and criticism. So the thing with this book is it is available to me in French. And while I am Canadian and I used to have passable French, I have not had to use French since I was in university. There's no way I could read this in the original language, which is unfortunate. I really wish I could, because it seems like it could be a very dry, sarcastic, witty sort of look at what this woman is going through in real life. And I'm kind of bummed I didn't get to at least check it out. But it's one of those books that, again, I'll keep my eye out for, but I'm not sure when it's going to make itself available to me with the libraries that I have. Too Much of Life, The Complete Chronicles by Clarice Lispector. She is an author that I have absolutely heard of before. I have never read anything from her, and I unfortunately will not be able to read this as I don't have access to it. But it seems to be she meditates on moments that make up life. And I think this is potentially a collection of news articles or something like that. It seems like it's definitely a more an untraditional format in terms of the books. In terms of the book, it is big. It is 752 pages, but I'm not totally sure what the formatting looks like, and it's unfortunately not one that I can get a hold of. But Clarice Lispector, definitely an author that I think a lot of us have heard of before. White Nights by Ursula Honeck, which is translated from the Polish by Kate Webster. This is a shorter book as well, 162 pages. It is a short story collection. I do not have access to this one. It's interwoven or interconnected 13. Oh my goodness. Let's relax. Take a sip. Okay. It is 13 interconnected stories that follows people from the same southern Polish village. And that's all I know about it. Short stories and I aren't typically friends, so it's probably not one that I would have wanted to pick up anyways. And because they're short stories, reading a chapter wouldn't have done it much justice, I don't think. But there it is for you to go look into if short stories interest you. And then finally, we have Yogurt and Jam, or How My Mother Became Lebanese by Lina Merhay, translated from the Arabic by Nadia Abdulatif and Adon Zafar. And this is a graphic memoir. It's the quest for self-identity or self-discovery. And this is one that I had heard of before. Seems really interesting. Unfortunately, I can't get my hands on it. I think it talks about her mother kind of mixing her German and Lebanese. I don't know if it's her heritage or her marriage or the mix of the two, but somewhere the German and Lebanese mixes. And I guess Lebanese, you put, what is it, salt and garlic in your yogurt, but she wants to put jam in her yogurt or something like that. And I just think it sounds really, really interesting and is one that I would have loved to pick up, but don't have the access to said book through my libraries. But these are the books for the Warwick Prize for Women in Translation. Please tell me if any of these interest you, if you've heard of any of these, if you've read of any of these, and yeah, let's, I don't know, throw our support just behind some female authors who don't necessarily or always get the English audience. And I'm going to finish my drink and have a very relaxed rest of the day, and I hope you do too, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.